Hello everybody, welcome back to Cinema Savvy. It is myself, George, bringing you a brand new video, and today I'm going to be talking about Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, as we don't celebrate the film's 20th anniversary, although that is a big thing happening on a re-release next week, which is just very coincidental timing. We're going to be talking about how the Goblet of Fire should be adapted for HBO'S Harry Potter series, which we know is filming here in the UK. Production started back in July. I almost said June. No, it was July. And I'm going to be talking about how I think it should be adapted. This isn't an ego check. This isn't me saying I know everything. I know more than most. I spent a good chunk of this year rereading the books the first time in a decade, and I thought it'd be a lot of fun to look at how they could structure the 7-season series, bringing things from different seasons or different books at earlier or later times, make it flow, make it more coherent. And that's what we're kind of doing with this. And there's been some really lovely comments on the first 3 videos. I have read them, replied to all of them. People with different ideas, people with similar ideas. And I guess we'll know in the coming years if any of this does come true. And I am going to say, you are adapting a book, especially those first 3. It's going to be quite hard for those things not to come true. But this is where everything changes. Episode 4, The Goblet of Fire. You've seen the memes, the jokes. This is when the books sort of double in size. And I have some rules I'm sticking with. Across this, I'm going to talk about them now because it's the best thing to do. And as I say in every video, if I'm looking down, I'm looking at my laptop notes. I've had to write notes on every single thing I've been reading, and I guess I can say this now. We're on Goblet of Fire. Obviously, when the books got longer, it took me longer to read them. Naturally, the first 3 I read in like February, March time. I think it was after the shoot tour with my family. I started on Philosopher's Stone. Around that point, Goblet of Fire I read, I think, in like April. So we're going a few months back, and I'll talk about next week my issues of Order of the Phoenix, but the notes are drastically different from 4 onwards, which I think is going to flow better as a video, and I have been a little bit nervous about doing the first 3, because when I loaded them up, the bare minimum on them, they weren't detailed notes, whereas it's a lot more detailed from 4 onwards, which I think is going to flow in the videos better. Obviously there's a lot more to talk about, and like what we've done with the others, I'm going to talk about the rules. I've set myself some rules. Number 1, this must be set in the 90s, which we know thanks to set photos is a thing. I've set a rule of 8 episodes per season. I'm not changing that for book 4, 5, 6 or 7. I know I've done that for 1, 2 and 3. It's made them a little bit easier, if I'm totally honest. There's not been as much as a challenge to structure them, because it's much easier to find that and you can develop things more, whereas with the latter ones it's far more difficult. And I've also had to come up with episode titles, and they can't be the same in multiple seasons, so they'll go through every episode as I have done, and I have a cold open to start every single season of the show with, which is what I'll be doing. I'll be talking about first with season 4, and it's something I've had a lot of fun with, and season 4 is going to be a little bit different actually, so with that in mind, let's get going. Episode 1, the Quidditch World Cup. Okay, so the cold open for season 4 is something we're going to answer in a later episode. And I am going to say this is an extended episode. As you can tell by the title, this is the Quidditch World Cup. When I say extended episode, I think this one could be like 75 minutes if need be. I don't think it needs to be longer if I'm honest, but an hour might be cutting it fine. 75 minutes might be okay. We can push it to that if we need to push it to that, because I do have a very important extended one later, but I'm also bringing in something new. I'm going to have a shorter episode which I'll talk about later on, but where I'm going to open the cold open for the season, I actually want to do the death of the riddles. There's that great chapter in the book where they speak about, you know, there was this terrible tragedy happened and everyone blamed this gardener Frank, etc, etc. Parallels to the day in the life of Uncle Vernon in the first chapter of Philosopher's Stone. And where I'm kind of playing with this one, I want to play at the fact that there was this bizarre thing that happened these decades ago, that Frank's been responsible for that he's lived his life, he's continued doing what he's had to do, and the full story of the cold open will be explained later on in this. So it's a little bit more difficult in the 4th one, because the mystery of the 4th book wasn't really present in the film. The mystery of the 4th book is who put Harry Potter's name in the Goblet of Fire. It is one of the most important topics of conversation. So having a cold open that doesn't set up a different mystery but something we can come back to. It also mirrors stuff that happens in the first season I wanted to do with the Potter family being killed. The second one with Myrtle's death. It's a bit grim, but I think it'd be a good way to open it, and you can bring in Frank, who we know obviously is killed in this opening as well when you get to modern day. So let's get the Frank stuff out of the way. We'll come back to the riddles later. But as I said, this is the Quidditch World Cup. Immediately we need to have Privet Drive. We need the Dursleys back in. We need to have the Weasley family coming to take Harry to go to the World Cup. One of the great scenes of the book that wasn't able to be put in the film. I've got a lot of issues with that fourth film. I love the fourth film. But there are so many things that had to change the structure of the story that I think this... And I'm just not just saying it because I like this book or it was so vastly different to the film. I genuinely believe that the fourth season could be the best season of the series in terms of storytelling, in terms of writing. It's not my favourite book. My favourite is The Half-Blood Prince, and I think that's going to have the same conversation for 2 books' time where things had to be left out, and that's going to be a big part of these episodes. And it's really the fourth season of the show where it will be justified as a series. When the people say, oh, we've seen this before, you haven't really seen much of this before when you hit this point. So this is where everything changes in the story, in the structure, for characters that are going to be brought in later on, characters I'm going to bring in this season, maybe some earlier than you might think. But we need to correct some things the films couldn't do. Because I'm not just bashing the films, I'm not bashing them at all in that respect. The films had to cut a lot of things. And unfortunately, the Dursleys were hard done by in the 4th and 6th, which is very frustrating because I love seeing the family. I think they're a great sort of introductory point of every book, that what ridiculous thing have they got going on with Harry this summer. And to have all the Weasleys coming to Privet Drive to take him away, to take him to the World Cup, blowing up the fireplace and meeting Arthur for the first time, Fred and George giving Dudley all the sweets that make him ill, bringing back memories to obviously what happened with him and Hagrid. There's a lot of fun that could be had at this. And whilst the season is going to get darker, this is also going to be one of the big seasons of developing the wizarding world. And we obviously get that with the World Cup. We've got to go back to the Burrow. We have to, very importantly, meet Bill and Charlie Weasley for the first time. These are 2 characters who have been spoken about in other seasons. They are involved to the smallest degree in other seasons, one of them far more prominently in the Philosopher's Stone of the Dragon stuff, but this is where we're going to meet them. We're going to have the family going off to the World Cup together. It's a really big moment. These are 2 characters that are going to be part of the Order of the Phoenix, and we get to really develop the Weasley family, something the films weren't able to do, because the films are about Harry Potter, but in a 56 episode TV series of how I'm doing it, yes, the Weasley family are going to get the time to develop many of the siblings. And especially when you look at the Deathly Hallows, the importance of having Bill, of having Fleur, who we'll talk about later on in the season, they really need to do, and it's not the film's fault, but they have to develop certain relationships, certain characters more. And the beauty of the series is they have a fully written series of books to then go off and develop from. So Bill and Charlie are coming into it. Let's talk about Percy Weasley. He has been very quiet in the first few episodes. We're going to have to set up his character arc. He's now got his job in the Ministry of Magic. He's working in one of the offices. Oh my god, that's very embarrassing for Barty Crouch. How I forgot his name, I don't know. Because Percy's got a big role in this season, and clearly for the family side of the story, a bigger role across season 5 as well. So we need to start setting him up post Hogwarts with his career. We then need to start playing with Fred and George Weasley. They want to set up this joke shop. We don't know it's a joke shop yet, but this is a big part of this season too. So we need to have Weasley's Wizard Wheezes being involved from a very small scale storytelling perspective, that they've been doing this at home across all these summers. They're going to start bringing out products or testing products, which is where we bring in the stuff with Dudley. So we're going to get a bit of time at the Burrow before we go off to the World Cup, spend a bit of time with that family. That's important. And this is why I want this to be extended. I don't just want to chuck names here, there, everywhere, but these episodes we're going to have more people to develop, especially when we get to the 5th one with so many new characters. So we can have the scenes of Privet Drive, the Burrow. Let's get quickly to the Portkey, where we're going to meet Amos Diggory for the first time, and Cedric Diggory. As I spoke about last week, I want Cedric to be starting to be developed in the 3rd book. We can bring him in. We get to see his relationship with Harry from Quidditch. Now we know he's going to be a rival. We know he's going to die in this season. It is a cursed character as such, and we'll start to play up their friendship a little bit more in this, seeing how much of a great guy he is, where he's gone on from the 3rd book. So we know they'll go together. And then we're going to get the campsite stuff, which a lot of it can be glossed over. You know, they spend time in all these lands, that this was just like Muggle fields. They keep changing the memory of the founders, who think of all these weird people wearing weird clothes. I don't need as much developing on that side of things, but we do need to show the campsite and how it functioned in this, because of what happens in the same episode. We need to bring in a very important character for the season in the same instance, which is Ludo Bagman. Obviously I'm doing book spoilers, If you don't know Ludo Bagman, I'm not going to sit here and read his biography to you. If you read this book, you'll know that he was one of the big characters missed from the film adaptations, but the impact he has in this book and the knock-on effect of his actions for the actual Wizarding War are huge. So we need to bring in this shady part of the Ministry. You know, think about your footballers. You've got this very popular ex-footballer. He was a bit sly. There's stuff going on the side. There's just an off vibe about him. They need to do this when we meet him for the first time, because he's going to take the bet with the Weasley twins. And from memory, the bet is that Crumb will catch the snitch and Ireland will win, because obviously the Chasers have done all of this. That bet is an integral part of this season too. So we're going to revisit that later on. In this same point of time, we also need to introduce Barty Crouch. Now, we know obviously Mr. Weasley being at the Ministry, he knows some of these people, but this first episode, it is a Wizarding world. It's not just, kids going to Hogsmeade, kids going to Diagon Alley. This is, we're meeting adults, we're meeting other characters. The students are a little bit older in this. We're going to start to see other Hogwarts students there. Quidditch is this huge event. We're going to see so many other people. That Oliver Wood's going to have a quick cameo in this one, going off the back of what happened winning the Quidditch Cup. We can find out what he's been up to, because he's become, I think, a Quidditch player, but like for a reserve team. We're going to see other students there. It's this humongous event. And you got to think football, like, if the World Cup was held in this country, okay, we wouldn't all get tickets because FIFA, different conversation, but no doubt you would know a lot of people that would go to that you went to school with. And that's kind of the logic with this World Cup final. So we get to spend time with the students, with the adults, in the campsite, building up to this adventurous final, hearing the murmurs. Oh, there's Victor Crumb. It's Ron's favourite seeker. He's the best seeker in the world. You can bring in all these little things, and you can start to have fun with it in this environment. Because the fourth film did that okay. When we got to Quidditch World Cup campsite, there was some fun there. But again, it's a film. It didn't get the time to sit, develop, to do a little bit more than it could have. So we're then going to have them going to the Quidditch World Cup final itself. And we get to meet two incredibly important characters for different reasons in this. Number one, Narcissa Malfoy, because obviously the Malfoys are in the box with the Weasleys. Obviously they're there with the Ministry of Magic. The others are obviously there through Barty Crouch, and obviously all of it is Ministry of Magic connections, but we need to bring in Narcissa Malfoy for the first time, who will have obviously a more prevalent role in 6 and 7, but it's still important to cast an actress for her early. They could have done it as early as season 1, but I understand why not, because there's nothing for her to do until you get to the fourth book, whereas obviously Lucius has got a lot more. So we'll get the Malfoy family tree locked in at this point in time. We're going to then bring in Winky the House Elf, which is Barty Crouch's house elf, another character lost from these films, who's got a very important storyline in this, setting everything up with Barty Crouch Jr. We can play up the fact that there's an empty seat she's holding where Barty Crouch never turned up. Obviously we know later on who that empty seat was for and who it is. So there's a lot of things we're playing with, a lot of ideas, and a lot of things I'm talking about, and I'm really nervous about how long this video is going to be. But the key thing, and I cannot underestimate this, we need to actually see a bit of the game. Because I remember watching Goblet of Fire for the first time on DVD, didn't get to see it at the cinema, I will write that wrong next week. When the snitch went up and it ended, I was fuming. I love seeing Quidditch in the films, and I was not happy with that. So, and obviously a big part of I spoke about the first 3 seasons is Quidditch. So it'd be really cool to see professional Quidditch players, not kids, doing it at the highest possible level, seeing different strategies, different tactics. I'm not saying show a whole game. We know we can't. You can do 5-10 minutes on the game easily, and it'd be great to see that. And it's sort of like the, not pun intended, it's the World Cup, but it is the peak of where Quidditch is going to go in the season, because it's not as important in the 4th book, it's not as important in the 5th. To an extent it is in the 6th, but we've sort of had that big moment of season 3 of winning the Quidditch Cup, and the reward of seeing that for 3 years is going to be seeing the professionals doing the Quidditch World Cup. So that's something I personally would really like to see. I think it's something they could and should do in the series, and this is where this lends itself so well to, that you're going to get the time to develop some of these stories longer and these ideas, this opening episode being that. But I'm not ending the episode with the Quidditch match. I'm ending the episode not even with the Death Eater attack that's going to follow, where, like football comparison, the old 80s hooligans come back together for a night out. We obviously get the Death Eaters attacking, we get to see things kicking off, then we're obviously going to get the Dark Mark in the sky. Not even going to end on a cliffhanger there, if I'm honest. I'm going to keep it going. This is why this episode is extended. Where I want to end this episode is having Barty Crouch with Winky, with Arthur and the other characters, where he's accusing them all of raising the Dark Mark, that he is scared that something's happened, that something's gone wrong. Harry's wand is what conjured the Dark Mark, but Winky ends up being sacked by him, which is like the most disrespectful thing that can happen to a house elf. It's a weird way to end the episode, but the reason I'm doing this is because I think the Quidditch World Cup just needs to be encapsulated into one episode, one extended episode. Like I said, I think 75 minutes you can get away with a maximum for this, and I think it'd be really worth it. And obviously where the story is going to go across this season is the series of mystery. What was that? Who raised that mark in the sky? What's going on? Why is Harry's scar starting to hurt more? These are all the questions we're going to keep asking every week, and this is absolutely the best way to end episode 1. Episode 2, Mad-Eye Moody. So episode 2 is going to be a bit more simple, a bit more linear themed, nothing too extravagant. Now, with it being an 8-episode season and the book being longer, I'm not sitting here saying X an episode every week. What we're going to probably have is not losing character development, because again, I'm not a writer on the show. This is how I think it could function in a show. But for these later ones, we're not going to take as long to get to Hogwarts, because you understand it in early. The one sometimes being on episode 3 for the first one, episode 2 on the others. This one, if I'm honest, is kind of beginning with that. So we have to have them returning to the Burrow post-World Cup. You can do a montage following news events, other things that have happened. I want to bring up Amos Diggory talking about Mad-Eye Moody, obviously the title of the episode. We've got what happened to the bins. That's obviously part of what's to happen in the season. But we can have literally 1 or 2 scenes, and then we'll have them all back on their way to platform 9 3/4. We can have some teasers that there's a big tournament happening, but for intensive purposes, we're going to be at Hogwarts quite quickly in this episode. What we are going to do is bring up the sorting ceremony, as Harry's going to get to witness one. Obviously, we're not going to show it all, but during the feast, we have a really important character moment, and it's going to be controversial because a lot of people dislike this in the books, and I myself agreed, but it's an integral part of what her character goes on to do and be. Hermione's going to obviously create Spoo. She's going to see about the house elves, obviously the treatment of what happened to Winky at the World Cup, finding out that the food at Hogwarts is made by house elves in the kitchens. That's my honest take, unfortunately, something the show has to do. Now, my caveat with Spoo is there is a noble intention of it in storytelling, and I understand the logic of, like, this one girl wants house elves to be freed from slavery. The entire Wizarding world is always berating and laughing and mocking her for that. I'm not saying that hasn't happened in real life, but I think the way the books handle a topic as historically as real as this, is just handled very poor in the books. And when these books have gone into like real life politics at times, it's done very well from a young adult perspective. Certainly bringing up race stuff of like half-bloods or wealth divides, that sort of stuff. You know, the bad parenting, the products of parenting. The Spoo stuff's really difficult, and you can include it in the show, and I'm going to choose to include it in the show, but it needs a proper rewrite by a talented screenwriter, and obviously it's a big part of Hermione's character, and we're going to get it in this. So getting out of the Spoo for now, we'll have Dumbledore's speech, and we have to talk about the fact that there is going to be no Quidditch this year at the World Cup at Hogwarts, because we've just had the tournament, we've had the Quidditch Cup the last few years. We're obviously going to have to lean onto the announcement of the Triwizard tournament, this huge thing that's been announced by them all. We're going to bring Mad-Eye Moody into this because we're seeing him for the first time coming in late to the hall for the feasts. And this is kind of where I'm going to keep going with this, is that, you know, normally you could have ended it with boom, we're going to announce this great tournament. No, that's not how we end this episode. We have to have them back at studying at school. We can do some lesson montages. We can start to tease Malfoy having a dividing relationship with Moody, not in a good way. We know as people that have read the books and seen the films that Moody's Barty Crouch Jr. He's going to hate Malfoy anyway because his dad was a Death Eater. But the show's going to have a lot of fun with that, thinking because Moody's an aura, they all know Malfoy's dad's corrupt, that he's going at him for those reasons, not the reality of that he was betrayed as a Death Eater. So we need to start to have a bit of a Malfoy-Moody relationship. Where I do want to go the first episode, or I want to end the first episode on, is Mad-Eye Moody's lesson, where it's his first event against the Dark Arts. I spoke so much last week about Lupin being the first competent teacher Harry has in Defense Against the Dark Arts. I have one wild thing, is that Barty Crouch Jr. is actually Harry's most important teacher in the books. Okay, this crazy psychopath, evil person, not nitpicking plot holes, but he still is a teacher for an entire year for his plan to work. But ultimately, and we'll get to this later on, he is the one that says to Harry he should be an aura, and what he teaches him in these lessons is going to be important. And I think the first the second episode has to end with the Unforgivable Curses Dark Arts lesson. We need to have the moment in which obviously you've got the Cruciatus Curse of Neville, knowing Barty Crouch played a part in that. We need to also have them seeing these three curses and what they do, how Harry was a survivor of it. And it's a very dour way to end the episode, but I think it's the right thing to do because it does then montage into the next term. Episode 3, The Goblet of Fire. So I spoke at the end of episode 2 about how it montages into the next term. That's obviously the start of episode 3 for me. We need to get through the seasons. Now, The Goblet of Fire is a very important part of the season, and obviously that's what I've done with the title of this. But we're not there yet. And whilst the film almost treats it like it happens on day one, I understand that for film terms. The show doesn't do that. The show has to carry it from like October through to June. That's like 9 months for essentially 4 events. 5 events including picking who is going to be who. So we need to have a bit of normality before the other schools come, before everything happens. And a montage of lessons or going through the term will do that fine. We have to have in this time the creation of Spoo by Hermione. Because of what's gone on with the House Elves, we can start to bring in the deriding that no one believes and no one cares for it. Again, a talented writer is going to have to improve on that, really is going to have to improve on that. And before we get to the arrival of the schools, I actually do want to talk about Letters from Sirius, because at this point in time, we know that he is still on the run. That can still be a part of this. He hasn't gone back to Grimmauld Place at this point in time. And we're going to have those letters of him checking in with Harry throughout the year. Of course, he's got Buckbeak with him too. This is going to be a big part of this, and we're going to get a little bit more time with the Sirius Black in the series, which is very important when we know how cut short it is in the 5th book. So we'll have the arrival of the schools. We'll have the Durmstrang boat. We'll have the carriages coming down for Beauxbatons. And what we'll do with this is have the big welcome feast and the announcement of the Goblet of Fire, the age lines being drawn, the rules being put in place, that these cannot do it under no circumstances can the under-17s do that. So it's going to be an interesting episode, because I'm not going to use the word fiddle, I've not used that once so far, but episode 3 has to really go at 50 miles an hour because of where I'm structuring this latter part of the season. And I'm not jumping too far ahead, but what I want to do with the 3rd episode is have the champions picked basically a scene or 2 before this finishes, and we can have all the stuff. We can start to tease Ron turning on Harry. We can have the interrogation of the other headmasters calling Hogwarts corrupt, all this sort of stuff. You can have Dumbledore asking Carmody, did you put your name in the Goblet of Fire, which I think John Lithgow will actually deliver that line very well. But we have to end this episode on the mystery of who put Harry's name in the Goblet of Fire. You can start pinpointing other people, because Ludo Bagman's involved in this. Barty Crouch, I can't remember. No, Barty Crouch is still in here at this point in time. We haven't got Percy covering for him. But Percy is involved with the Ministry. And we can start to have, not suspects as such, but we need to build up that mystery of who put Harry's name in the Goblet of Fire. It's so important for this season. And what I want to do with that is end it on those questions. And then end this 3rd episode, because it's going to really pick up in episode 4. Episode 4, The First Task. So episode 4 is titled The First Task, which is obviously going to be, we know where this episode's going. But before we get there, we need to have a bit more time passing. We need to have the fallout with Ron and Harry, because it's the first time the two have actually fell out properly. And these are 2 best friends. It's not the only time they're going to fall out either. But it's essential that we build up this Ron jealousy of Harry, that Ron does look like an idiot for doing it, but at the same time, with that sort of teenage lad mentality, it will be understandable to a lot of people as how did Harry get his name in the Goblet of Fire. He didn't choose to, but everyone knows Harry isn't going to choose to do that, to have that happen. You know, things have been done by coincidence. He's just on the wrong side of it. Okay, he's the main character, but we need to play this up as we move into November time for the first task. And where I'm then going to go into this is the weighing of the wand ceremony, which it's very important, actually, not just for season 4, but for season 7. And we're going to introduce Rita Skeeter for the first time, who's going to crop up in more than just one season. She's got a very important role in the 7th season, but obviously writing the book on Dumbledore. She's going to be involved in the Order of the Phoenix, and she's a somewhat comedic antagonist in this. There's a mystery of how does she keep finding out everything, and that's going to get answered in season 4. So we've got to bring Rita Skeeter into this. And at the same time of having the ceremony, we get to bring back Ollivander, which is exciting, because he was part of this, the weighing of the wands. And we can also have Victor Krum talking about Gregorovich, who was his wand maker, because Gregorovich has also got a part to play in season 7. Now, we don't see him in this, But it will be really interesting to get a bit more wand lore from Ollivander, him with the other champions. And I've not really spoke about Fleur or Cedric yet. There's not too much to talk about at this point in time. But I think it's very important to have this moment happen. And it gives a bit of gravitas for when we do get Ollivander back in Season 7, that he didn't just see Harry once 6 years ago, that there has been somewhat a meeting of the pair of them many years later. And I think it's a great way to do this. And then I want to segue this into Harry going off to see the dragons with Hagrid and Charlie. Obviously Charlie's part of the setup for bringing the dragons in. By meeting him in the first episode, we've had some stuff work out really well there. And I think it's essential for them to really have played up the fallout with Ron, but by bringing these other supporting characters, by default they're getting more to do now. They're getting more screen time, they're getting more development, and they have relationships themselves with Harry. And I think it's a great fun one to have the dragons being shown to them earlier, because everyone's in on it. The whole point of this competition is that everyone's finding out stuff they're not meant to find out. And we get that with the first task more than anything. We can then play up the serious meeting with Harry in the fire. Him basically saying, watch yourself around Karkaroff. We can start to put Karkaroff up as a former Death Eater. Did he put Harry's name in the Goblet of Fire? We're going to keep playing all these different angles with potential suspects. Because again, we have to really drag out the mystery of who did put his name in the Goblet of Fire. Because you don't find out till the end of the book. And whilst the films do it in a different way, the film doesn't really big up the question, because it can't in that sort of runtime, but it can in a series. And where I'm going to continue to go with this is Harry having Cedric giving him the hint about the dragons. And I want to have Harry training with Mad-Eye Moody about learning Accio, about that he's trained on a broomstick, so find a way to be able to do this. We need to play up Harry and Moody having a relationship, that Mad-Eye Moody is this crazy person, but at the same time there's a level of somewhat trust building between them. And I think it's essential to develop that. But where it's going to go is into the first task. And this is where I'm stuck, because this is an hour's episode, and I've already spoke about a lot of things. What I've spoke about could easily be like 20 to 30 minutes. And I'm looking at real, honest, budgetary things. Does the series need to show all 4 champions retrieving the egg from the dragon? It's a great question to ask, because the budget for that would be insane. Look at how the House of Dragons handled budgets for dragons, for different things, different seasons. Could they really do all of that for essentially a 15 to 20 minute set of sequences? Would it be too repetitive to have 4 dragon sequences? I'm going to give the devil's advocate answer of someone talking online that's hearing this show has like unprecedented levels of budget, etc., etc. Whilst the film did something very well by having Harry hearing the audience for the others, to get more time with his own, the sequence itself isn't meant to be that long, because the purpose of this is to do it in the quickest amount of time. I want to see all 4 champions. It doesn't need to be the entire 4 sequences. It can be glimpses. I'm not saying match the day highlights reel, but what I'm saying is there's a way for the writers to find a way to put all 4 contestants in, because we then need to have Harry retrieving the egg and having the scoreboard of his being great. We need to have a great moment, which is Crumb complimenting Harry on his flying abilities and seeing that Harry actually is a threat to this competition. Just being underage doesn't make him any different. So I need to have the task happen. I need to have the scores coming in. I think where I'm going to end this episode is the big part in the common room after. Harry patching up with Ron and ending the episode on a cliffhanger of him opening the egg for that disgusting scream, which can start to put us on the trajectory of getting to the second task. Episode 5, the Yule Ball. So I mentioned the second task, but episode 5 is going to be the Yule Ball, which is an incredibly underrated sequence. Like, yes, it's very funny, there's dancing and they're teenagers and they've got to do this, that and the other. But I think what will be interesting for this one is to see a bit more of the politics surrounding it. And this is where the series comes into its own from a book perspective for me, that I love seeing all the inter-school politics, the stuff going on in the Ministry of Magic. Obviously we get a field day with the 5th book on all of that, especially onwards. But episode 5, for a simplistic start, we need to bring back Dobby, who was not in the 3rd book, has an integral role in the 4th, and will continue to be a part of the series through to his death in the Deathly Hallows. And Dobby's situation in this is the fact he's working at the school, the fact that he's wearing loads of clothes, and the fact that he's being paid a salary to work in Hogwarts kitchen. We can then have Winky brought in through that factor, and Winky, who is still upset. I think she's an alcoholic at this point, an alcoholic elf. She's depressed, making teases about Bagman being a very dodgy individual. It's important to start playing this up because we need to keep continuing the conversation of who is the suspect for putting Harry's name in the Goblet of Fire, what is going on, why are things going the way they are going. There are still mysteries to be had, and things from that Quidditch World Cup have not been resolved. And by bringing Dobby back, you obviously get the sequences of Winky. You can have a bit of fun with him in all the clothes. The fact that the elves don't want to be freed as well, which is against part of the Spoo issues. So that's a big part of this, but they'll come back a little bit more. You need to have the announcement of the Yule Ball for all the students. The fact that almost every student stays that's of age to be in this, which they didn't do in other years. You go back to the Christmas in the third book. I think there was like Dumbledore, Trelawney, Harry, and a couple of other students that stayed. Yet most of the year stayed because it's the Yule Ball. So we can have some of the teen drama stuff. Harry asking Cho, who's already obviously gone with Cedric. You can have Ron asking Fleur, or him being obsessed with her, which is ironic because we know she marries one of his brothers. And we can start to plant some seeds of relationships. We can have Ginny and Harry being teased up, but Ginny's already going with someone. We can have a bit of fun with these other characters because where it has to lead to is obviously Harry and Ron going with the Patel twins. And where I'm going to keep going with this episode is having the ball itself, the Christmas day, the build up to them doing the ball itself, the dancing. We need to have the huge revelation of Hermione and Victor Crumb. And this is a really, I don't want to say fun one, but obviously Hermione go down the steps in the film is iconic in its own right. It is the same in the book that she's deemed quite beautiful for the first time, that I think she gets in a fight with someone and her teeth get enlarged through a jinx. So she essentially has like her teeth going to a normal size for the first ever time. Now, I appreciate Kid Arabella Stanton, I've not seen a photo of her on set, whatever, but also she looks like the book part of Hermione. I don't think they're going to make her wear false teeth for 3 seasons to take them out, but this is obviously going to be a big episode for her character arc. Ron continuing to be seen as not the best of friends by him turning on Hermione for being with Crumb, just his outright jealousy. There's also a bit of awkwardness for them to encounter because the Victor Crumb being a lot much older than Hermione type thing. Don't be surprised if they maybe pull his age down, but they can't because he's got to be a certain age to be in the Triwizard tournament. But they need to find a way around that, which is a bit weird the more you think about it as adults. But what I kind of want to do this Yule Ball is not just having fun, because stuff has to happen in this episode. I want to have Dumbledore talking about finding a room when he needed the toilet that appeared, because that's the room requirement first tease. I want to bring in Percy being at the Yule Ball instead of not Peter Crouch, different sportsman, instead of Barty Crouch, because we need to start playing up there's something to going on Barty Crouch away from this. We need to have the Snape and Karkaroff sequences of one another, where Karkaroff is scared about the dark marks starting to emerge more and more and more. So there are so many political things that go on with this. We need to have Hagrid and Maxine's discussion of him saying he's a half-giant and her being insulted. There's so much drama in the Yule Ball. You don't really think about it in that way, but a lot happens in this. And there's a lot of knock-on factors that come in later episodes. But the end I'm going to put on this one is Cedric telling Harry about the egg. Essentially the clue. It's not a great clue, but we can end it on that. We can bring in Harry's jealousy of Cedric being with Chubb as well, with the fact we've teed them both up in season 3 being in the Quidditch sequences. And it's going to be a very nice episode. It'll be a very Christmassy episode, because that's what I think the show is going to probably do every year. But I think this is the best way to handle the Yule Ball, to keep it away from the events, to start to build up to that finale. We don't want to do a task every episode. That'd be way too much, way too action oriented. We need to at least have time to breathe in between. I think whilst the Yule Ball is an event rather than a task, it's just about on the limit of that. Episode 6, the second task. So episode 6 is going to be a fun one, to an extent. We have to start off with Hagrid going AWOL from the school, Rita Skeeter having a scoop that Hagrid's a half-giant. We can start to bring the politics of half-breeds not being liked by certain students' parents, stuff like that. The fact he's a half-giant, that the giant's not liked. We can bring in the new teacher that is going to cover Hagrid in this one, which is going to be interesting because the reality of this is that she's a better teacher than Hagrid was, Professor Grubblyplank. And it's a big part because Hagrid hasn't had as much to do in the 3rd season nor the 4th. He's in the 4th a lot more than the 3rd from my perspective, but obviously he's featured much heavily in the 1st and 2nd. He will be featured more in the 5th, and obviously in the 7th we're going to get some big sequences with him. So it's nice to get as much as we can with him in season 4. But what I want to kind of bring up is the Hogsmeade sequences. We can talk about Barty Crouch going missing, Harry seeing Ludo Bagman, Bagman trying to essentially help Harry with information. And where we're going to start teasing is some of the dodges are Ludo Bagman. We've got goblins there that are trying to find Bagman that he's hiding from. We can start to play at the fact that Fred and George Weasley got problems with Bagman, that there are things going on we don't know about. And for Harry, who doesn't know about them, they might seem trivial for now, but we know they're going to be bigger problems down the line. And we're also going to have them confronting Rita Skeeter for what she wrote about Hagrid in I think it's the Hogshead they go to, or whether it just be Hogsmeade. So we'll have that sequence. We can't drag out Hagrid stuff too long. So we'll have Hagrid hiding in his hut. We'll have them basically getting him to come back to being a teacher, him being ashamed that he's a half giant, or people's perception of that. Doesn't read as well because everyone knows he's 10 foot tall. Everyone would have worked out he's a half giant with a bit of common sense anyway. Never really cared for that, but that's not going to bring up too much from the time to tell the story, but we know it has an impact on what he does in the 5th book. And where I'm going to go, this is having the egg being opened in the prefect's bathroom. We can bring in Moaning Myrtle for a little cameo, kind of a little bit of fun there like the films did. But we've got a really important sequence before the second task, and that is Snape and Moody not fighting on the stairs, but Harry's basically caught out. Snape catches in, Moody comes down, is looking out for Harry, but from that conversation, Harry gives Moody the Marauders map, which is a clearly important moment for later on in this season. And obviously he'll be without that, but he's looking at the perspective that he got bailed out by Mad-Eye Moody, but obviously we know it's Barty Crouch Jr. doing it for himself. So it's going to be interesting to see that sequence play out. Snape, who's not had a heavy role as such in the Goblet of Fire, but he will obviously in latter seasons, but the sequences in this is more him building back to the Dark Knight coming back. What we're then going to have is another letter by Sirius, but we need to really get to the second task now, so we need to have Dobby back in giving Harry the Gillyweed too. I hope I'm not just jumping over stuff, but I'm also conscious of the time. Okay, so I spoke about time and the camera battery went, which is a recurring thing of this show. I'm scared for later episodes. I'm also scared for this, but we are in episode 6 out of 8. So I was talking about the second task and that we need to bring back Dobby again in this sequence because Dobby is the person who gives Harry the Gillyweed. If people didn't know that, people obviously read the book do, but it's part of their relationship that Dobby has done this amazing thing for Harry Potter. Obviously, a big part of this is Dobby always looking out for Harry in that respect. But we do need to then do the second task, and I'm not going to sit here talking about like the ins and outs of what that task entails and what it's do the water stuff. Obviously, we all know where it's going to go with that. Not too much changed from the books of the Mer people. I think the film handled it, if I'm honest, it's probably quick as the series should do it. But I'd like them to play at the fact that Barty Crouch isn't there again and that Percy Weasley is there again, that his disappearances are starting to be noticed by Harry. And where I'm going to end this episode is after the second task's ending of the scores. Episode 7, Barty Crouch. So episode 7 is going to be a shorter episode. I'm not taking the mick or anything. I mentioned as an extended episode on episode 1. The episode 8 will be extended too, for obvious reasons, but this is going to be shorter for me. When I was reading these, it was really tricky to place some of what I want to do in this, and there was just nothing really happening until the finale for me. And the season 4 finale is probably the most important finale after season 7, because this is where the entire story changes. So I don't mind having a shorter episode 7 to get that moment of giving more time to episode 8 without taking the mick. We need to have Harry meeting up with Buckbeak and Sirius. We need to have them discussing Barty Crouch again. And things are really starting to get strange now. The fact that we can talk about how Barty Crouch's son wasn't all that Sirius knows a little bit more about him, that we're going to get these comparisons with Percy, because obviously we know that Percy's going to be an issue moving forward where he's going to put business over family. We can have some more sequences with the kitchen catching up on Winky, and things are starting to come together. There's some things happening here, but what I'm going to do with this, it sounds really quick and dramatic, but it's not my intention. We're going to have the announcement of it being the maze. The Quidditch pitch has been turned into the maze. That's why there's been no Quidditch this year. A really simple explanation, which they handle well. We're going to get the moment of Harry and Crumb with one another. But what that's going to turn into is obviously when Barty Crouch appears out of nowhere. shriveled, on the verge of dying, etc., etc. We can play that, and I'm going to end it here, which sounds so short to have spoken about on here. It obviously would be like a 30-minute episode if I'm honest, but I honestly actually want everything put forward into the season finale. Episode 8, The Third Task. So I said episode 8 is an extended episode. For conversation's worth, this was roughly 150 pages of the book. Now, I don't know if that's a quarter or a fifth. I'm not taking the mick and saying this is a 2-hour episode. I think this is a 90-minute episode. And I don't think I've gone here yet on the series. I think I may go here one more time, which is probably going to be the finale. That's a different conversation. But I hope this makes sense as to why I'm structuring a very short episode 7, a very long episode 8. I'm going to open with it being the new dream. That Harry has this thing of what's going on, Voldemort or the baby, this weird object, this weird person, Wormtail's being punished for something, and we need to have Harry going to Dumbledore about what happened with Barty Crouch as well, that Crumb was knocked out, all that stuff. But what we're going to have is Harry's first trip into the Pensieve with Dumbledore. We're going to get the first memory, which is Karkaroff's trial. We're going to get the second memory, which is Ludo Bagman's trial. We're going to get the third memory, which is Barty Crouch Jr.'s trial, which is going to have his dad sending him to Azkaban. But more importantly, and something that will be spoken about and will be highlighted from, we're going to have the introduction of Bellatrix Lestrange. They can cast their actress great. We'll have them in the flashback, and we will mention it is because of what they did to Neville Longbottom. Now, within this, we'll have Harry finding out that Snape was a Death Eater. And when they come out of these dreams, we'll have Dumbledore having a discussion with Harry, and we can have Dumbledore teasing Snape's redemption. Not teasing it to Harry, but I think from memory he says something essentially saying to Harry, like, well, if you knew what Snape was doing it for, you'd understand. That sort of thing. And it's a great sort of 10-15... And I did think, do you end episode 7 of all this? But I don't think it's worth it. I think this is a great way to build up a bit of hype for the final task, because everything's starting to go wrong behind the scenes. They don't just have a normal school year and it's dodgy at the graveyard. They have all this weird stuff happening before that leads up to it. Much better than just finding Barty Crouch's random dead body. So we will have what happens at the morning of the third task. We'll have the Rita Skeeter's latest article come out, where we'll start to have Hermione starting to put 2 and 2 together about Rita Skeeter. But the third task itself is going to be obviously not as big part of this episode as we think. The third task, the graveyard... Sorry, not the graveyard. The third task, the maze, is actually going to be fairly quick. Like, I'm talking like 10-15 minutes, because we've got the Blast-Ended Scroots, we've got Hagrid's been doing with them, we've got Crumb using the Cruciatus Curse, we can have the Sphinx there, we can have a lot of fun with this, and whether we want to spend time with the other challengers might be up to the studios. I don't know, I'm not personally too bothered myself, but we all know where this episode is going and the importance of this episode. So we will have Harry and Cedric going to the graveyard together, and now at this point in time, I think we're like 45 minutes into an episode. I'm reading my notes, trying to piece this together in my head. But the graveyard sequence is the main event of this. We know it's happening. We know Voldemort's going to get rebirthed. But we have to have Cedric being killed by Wormtail at Voldemort's orders. That's a huge part of this. This is like the first person Harry sees die properly. He wasn't alive when Quirrell died. He passed out holding him. He's going to witness this, and obviously we know the trauma it's going to cause and the politics it's going to cause. So the death of Cedric is obviously huge for this moment. We then have to immediately have Voldemort being rebirthed with what Wormtail's been working on, which, again, the film handled this so well. So it's going to be good luck, I say, to whoever they cast. But everything about Voldemort changes from his birth for me. And I loved Ray Fiennes' performance in the films. I think he's one of the best actors Britain's produced, if I'm honest. I loved his attempt at Voldemort. He was this really overly excited. He's not had a human body in decades. He's so energetic and all over the place. He's kind of wild. Like, he's like your crazy uncle in that film. He's having so much fun. You know, I can touch you now. All that sort of stuff. I'm bringing it all down. So when Voldemort is rebirthed, he's meant to be like the scariest person ever. Like, people are afraid to say his name. I'm not saying he's not scary under Ray Fiennes. It worked for what it was in the films, but this is going to have to be a different type of performance of Voldemort, and this is the episode that's going to sell us on everything. So we will have Voldemort giving the speech to Harry about he has done more to overcome death than any mortal, because that's important for Horcruxes. We're going to have to bring in an actor who I think can play terrifying. We need an actor with a unique face structure, because I think this will be makeup, not CG. I think we're going to get the long fingers and all the Voldemort description stuff. If they're really bigging up the authenticity factor, I do ask the question, do they give him the red eyes? I just do not know how that will look on camera. And obviously, based upon what actor they hire for that, that will be important. But Voldemort needs to have a completely different performance, a different presence. And I think the series will have the time to develop him more, to play the fear factor, which the films do miss with him. So it's essential to have the Death Eaters arrive. And when they arrive, he's just standing there. He's energetic, he's not having fun, he's not taking the piss. They're like bowing down at him. Like they'll be as fearful of him, the fact he's returned, more so than them being excited by him. Because these are the people that got away with it, that have been scot-free. This is where we're going to get some humongous moments. I mentioned, the mortal death comment. I've read my notes wrong. That comes in now about how he tells the Death Eaters he has overcome it. But his disappointment with them, I think he tortures a couple of them as well. And this is important to start building things up. We're going to get him giving Wormtail the hand, which we know has got a big part in Season 7. We're going to have Lucius Malfoy there, who confirms to us, the audience, yes, this guy is a Death Eater after all, which is a big moment. And we can start to bring in other characters. McNair, who we saw in Season 3. We're going to have this loyal closed circle, and then we have to have him giving the speech about how he survived for so long. And what's essential for me is that we can play up some of his flashbacks, that where the location he is. He isn't going to talk about the fact he's Tom Riddle, but obviously we'll get to the cold open a little bit later. But having Voldemort talk about what he did, we can even have a full flashback, a cameo with Quirrell if he really needed to, about someone came to him. We can have the mystery of Bertha Jorkins, who I haven't actually spoken about, which is my own behalf, but how she came to him or accidentally found them there. We can talk about the fact he's saying he is a Death Eater at Hogwarts now, very intentionally nameless, because we still know who put Harry's name in the Goblet of Fire. So we can have this humongous tease of him unravelling the plan to everyone of how he's been able to return. And it's going to be quite terrifying. It needs to be scary, and you need the right actor. And I'm going to say it now. It is the boring, but I think correct choice. The more I've reread these books, the more I actually think it needs to be a Cillian Murphy type. You just need someone cold-blooded that you can view as a killer, that's going to have a presence in a performance, both physical, and I think the dialect option is essential for that. Do I think Cillian Murphy will take it? No, I don't. But I wouldn't be surprised if they do get him, because this will be the role they throw the most money at, and it's actually not as big a role as you think. He's going to be in one episode in Season 4. He's going to have a cameo in Season 1. He's going to rock up at the end of the Order of the Phoenix. He isn't actually going to be in the Half-Blood Prince because it's all flashbacks, and he's obviously going to be integral to Season 7. So I do think they would be able to lure Cillian Murphy, or an actor of that higher level, i.e. an Oscar winner, Emmy winner, you name it, but it's essential they get the right actor for the tone of the series and for what they intend to do with Voldemort's depiction, and it does need to differ from the film, which will work out in the longer term. So, following on from my mini Voldemort speech, we're going to talk about the duel. We have to have Harry dueling Voldemort, and it's essential we get Priori and Contentum, because, I don't even know if I pronounced that right, because obviously they've got the matching wands. We've had Ollivander in this. He's going to talk about it again in Season 7. But what comes from that is him seeing his mother, his father, Cedric Diggory. We're seeing his last victims, Bertha Jorkins. We're going to have Frank there. That's going to answer that cold open stuff as well. I know we don't have as big a payoff because it is a dream of Harry's, but it's still a payoff to the fact that Frank was essentially a victim of all of these. We're going to find a bit more out in the 6th one, but it's a very weird sequence to do, and I think the films did it very well. And then obviously we need to have Harry return to Hogwarts with Cedric's body. So that's a lot to take in, but it's still going to be in this extended finale. And at this point in time, we're probably in like an hour and 10, hour, 15 minutes in, if I'm honest, which is quite a lot. But again, this is the episode they're going to do it. So we're going to have Mad Eye taking Harry away from Cedric's body. We're going to have him confessing everything. Dumbledore, Snape, and McGonagall all going in. And then we're going to have the Veracerium, Barty Crouch telling his story about how he planned and how he did everything across the year, that it isn't the real Mad Eye Moody, that he is part of this. We're going to have him being at the Quidditch World Cup, the invisibility cloak, taking Harry's wand, setting up Winky, killing Barty Crouch. There's so much to do with this, and it really does establish him as a great villain. And then the story needs to go into the wildest future setup direction, which is Harry going to Dumbledore's office, to which Sirius Black is already there and in person with him. Whilst they are there, we're going to have Fudge having the Dementors kiss Barty Crouch's soul, and I want that on camera, because we're now going to start playing at the the Fudge and Dumbledore stuff. We're going to have the hospital wing sequence, Fudge and Dumbledore arguing, Fudge telling Dumbledore it's not true, dismissing Harry's opinion and Dumbledore's. We're going to start to begin the Wizarding War. We have to have Dumbledore setting up his plan, forcing Sirius and Snape to shake hands, having the Weasleys coming on board, Sirius doing to go and get the names, essentially teasing the Order of the Phoenix we need to get them all back together. And we're going to start playing that. We're going to have the Weasleys pledging their allegiance to him as well. And it's going to be this insane setup sequence. And I could end the season on this, but I'm not going to. I'm going to continue ending the season by ending it with them getting back to 9 3/4. We're going to have Dumbledore doing his end of year speech. We're going to have the Hogwarts Express journey home. Hermione unveiling that she's a sicko and got Rita Skeeter as a beetle to answer the plot story of this is how Rita Skeeter got all these articles all year round. We're going to have moments of Malfoy and Harry eyeing each other up because Harry now knows your dad's a Death Eater. We're going to have the Weasley twins and Ludo Bagman drama with Harry where the twins tell Harry. And where I'm going to end this season is at platform 9 3/4, and it is Harry giving them the winnings of the Triwizard tournament to set up the company properly. And I think that's the best way to end the season, because whilst it's not a high note, it's all quite depressing post Cedric's death. It's leaving enough there to set up 5, and the end of season 4 becomes a season 5 setup. And whilst I might have took the mick with this finale being 150 pages, I honestly think you can do this in an hour and a half. Really, the limit hour 40. I'm not going to do this every single season, but I can sacrifice chunks of other episodes in the season for this finale to be right. I don't want the third task to have been episode 7 and the graveyard to be episode 8. I think it's got to be a great surprise for people that haven't read the books and haven't seen the films to find out that Voldemort's alive, he's rebirthed. And with that shock, this episode should in turn be extended to cover that. So I hope that's made some sense. And that's where I'm going to round out this video on how I think the Goblet of Fire should be adapted for HBO. I really want people to comment on this, because this is when it's going to get difficult, it's going to get harder to do. The videos are going to get longer. I'm scared about editing this one. I don't know how long it's going to be. Thankfully, the battery's only gone out once. I've got another 2 spare here, which is great. But obviously, next up we know is the Order of the Phoenix, so people please do comment, get involved. It's a very busy time at the channel. Obviously, we've got 3 more of the Harry Potter books to do. Should there be an announcement on September the 1st, we'll be covering that too. I'm just speculating whether they get some photos of them on set or something, official photos I should add. I do think something's going to be coming in the pipeline, and we'll cover it when there's something officially to cover. So that is me rounding out for this day. Thank you all so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you on the next one.